Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free review of Mirror Mirror by Calonita. I believe this is the 6th book in the Twisted Tales series, which is a series of companion novels, so you don't have to read them in order, which is what I did, which is why I can't remember which book in the series this is. But basically, each book takes a different Disney film and puts some kind of twist on it. So for example, some of the ones I've read in the past are As Old as Time, which is what if Belle's mother was the enchantress that cursed the beast. So in this one, the tagline is what if the evil queen poisoned the prince, which personally, and I'll touch more on this later, but I think a more accurate tagline would have been like what if Snow White's father was still alive or something like that. Like I said, I'll touch on this more later, but I actually have a really big issue with the tagline of this book. So this book starts off just like the film does. The queen tells the huntsman to kill Snow White. He doesn't. She runs into the woods and lives with the dwarves, but not before the huntsman tells her some interesting information about her mother's death. So that's like the first real twist of the story. It's also told in alternating chapters, so half of the chapters were following Snow White and then the other half were following the evil queen, and a lot of the evil queen's chapters are actually flashback scenes to when she was growing up and like how she became the queen, so we do get a villain origin story in this as well. So I'm always a bit nervous going into these books because I've read 4 of the other books in the series in the past, and 2 of them I really loved and 2 of them I really didn't like, so I was a bit nervous whether this was going to be a hit or a miss for me, and I'm very happy to say that I actually really enjoyed this, and it's probably my 3rd favorite in the series so far. The issue that I usually have with these books is that the authors don't always properly capture the like personalities of these characters, which are obviously characters that we've grown up watching and we feel like we know them really well, so you can tell when an author doesn't quite capture a character correctly. With Snow White and like the prince and everybody, I feel like it's a bit easier with them because there wasn't a whole lot to them in the original movie, so Snow White and the prince definitely have more of a personality in this book, which I think is fine, but I do also think that she like captured the personalities of the dwarves really well. I also really enjoyed her writing. Not all of the books in this series are written by the same author. I think there are like 3 authors now that have written different books in the series, so I had never read from her before, so I wasn't really sure what to expect from her writing, but I actually really liked it. It wasn't very flowery, which I definitely appreciate because I don't like flowery writing, but it still had this kind of like fairy tale essence to it, which I definitely really appreciated. So as far as the origin story of the queen, which I feel like is a very important part of this story, I thought it was well done. I feel like the evil queen and the Queen of Hearts are probably the 2 villains that I've read or watched the most origin stories for, and I have to say the evil queen is not one of my favorite villains, so anytime I read one of her origin stories, so long as it's like interesting, I'm like, that was fine. But I feel like if you're probably like a really big evil queen fan, then you probably care a lot more about the details of her origin, whereas if it's just like mildly interesting, I think it's pretty good. So I can't really speak a whole lot on her origin story. I feel like this version of her origin wasn't any more interesting than any of the other versions that I've read, but it also wasn't any worse. It was just kind of, they're all good, so that wasn't helpful at all. Overall, I really enjoyed this. I only had a couple issues with it. The first one is that the ending was pretty rushed in my opinion, and the other one is that it had a lot of like convenient plot devices in it, which Disney movies in general are already kind of like pretty convenient, and you have to like suspend your belief a little bit. In this specifically, there was like a convenient character that is neither featured nor referenced at all in the original movie. It's just kind of like, here's a really convenient character that is perfect for this particular situation we are in, and I just didn't really like that. That was a bit too convenient for me, so if I could change one thing about this story, I would have taken that character out and just put something more realistic in there to help the characters out. So that's basically my review of this book. It had a couple of flaws, but overall it was a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend it if you like Snow White or villain origin stories or just a really big Disney fan like me. However, there are a couple things that I did want to mention. Like I said earlier, I have an issue with the tagline of this book, which is, what if the evil queen poisoned the prince? It's on the cover, it's even bigger on the back of the cover, and the book actually opens with a prologue that is basically a flash forward scene to when Snow White discovers that the prince has been poisoned. The thing about this though is that that doesn't actually happen in the story, story until I believe the last 30 pages of this book. So the tagline basically spoils this story, which is so frustrating, and it's clear that it was just used as like a marketing tool, because obviously that's going to capture a lot of people's attention and they're going to pick up the book and buy the book, and they probably knew that, so they just like chucked that prologue in there, which literally doesn't serve any purpose to the story. Like, that prologue didn't need to be there, but they probably thought people are going to think we spoiled the book, so we'll put this prologue in there and spoil you right at the beginning. So yeah, that was very frustrating, and honestly, if that prologue hadn't been there, I probably would have tried to just not even mention the tagline in this review, but since it is there and that's like the first thing you read, it all spoils the story. I'm sorry, it's frustrating, but like, it's still interesting. You should still read this book. Another issue I had with this was the title of this book. So if you don't know, Mirror Mirror is kind of like a Mandela effect at this point, where a lot of people remember the original line in the movie as being mirror mirror on the wall, when in actual fact it's magic mirror on the wall, and mirror mirror is not a thing that happens. So I was also very nervous going into this book, because I was like, if she says mirror mirror in here, that's not authentic to the original, I'm going to be very angry. But she doesn't. She does say magic mirror in this book. So it's like, why is that the title? Again, probably marketing, because a lot of people remember it as being Mirror Mirror, and there was like the movie and everything, so yeah. That's just another little like frustrating thing, but what can you do? And one other thing, which isn't like a flaw or anything, I just thought it would be interesting to mention, but I was very curious going into this book to find out what the prince was going to be called, because obviously in the film he's never named, and apparently in some Disney source they confirmed that the prince in Snow White was called Prince Florian, I think, and Cinderella's prince was called Prince Henry with an I. In this book, he's called Prince Henry with an I. I don't really care. I was just glad that his name was not Prince Ferdinand, because that is another Snow White misconception. There are actually some people out there still who think his name is Prince Ferdinand, and it is not. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but yeah, I just thought that was a little thing to mention. So I think that is all for my review. I'm sorry if it was a little bit rambly. I usually like bullet point what I want to say, but this was spur of the moment, so I just said whatever came to my head. If you read this book, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought of it. I'd love to discuss it with you in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!